Hello and welcome to Daily Politics. We are reaching you live from TrustTV here in Abuja. I am Suleiman. Today we discuss yet another bailout to the states. Bailouts have a long history in Nigeria. In 2015, as oil prices slumped to an all-time low, the economy slided into a recession and many states became cash-strapped. Nearly all of them could not pay civil servants their salaries for many months. To help, the president approved a $2.1 billion intervention package to help. The loans were to be repaid through deductions from their monthly allocation. So far, there have been 3 such interventions by the federal government. And yet, including the Paris Club refunds. However, there are allegations by many that bailouts were mismanaged by some states. Of course, the states have not yet paid back all these loans. And yet, only yesterday, a fresh $656 billion was approved by the federal government for the states. So how will all these issues be resolved? What will happen to the salaries of workers in the states? For answers to these questions, I'm being joined by 2 analysts, Professor Uche Uwaleke and Barrister Sam Karbo. Professor Uche Uwaleke is Nigeria's first professor of capital market and a former commissioner of finance in Imo State. Barrister Sam Karbo is a constitutional lawyer, a syndicated columnist, and a social commentator. Welcome to Daily Politics, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. But before we go into our discussion proper, we'll take a minute to bring you a roundup of politics in the news today. Stay tuned.
President Muhammadu Buhari has promised to consider what he called heavy request for an unconditional release of Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the outlawed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB. Kanu, who is currently standing trial for treason, is in custody of the Department of State Services. The president made the promise on Friday while receiving a group under the aegis of highly respected Igbo greats led by First Republic parliamentarian and Minister of Aviation Mbazulike Amechi at State House Abuja. He said the unconditional release of Kanu runs contrary to the doctrine of separation of powers between the executive and judiciary. Armed men have attacked the campaign office of the Minister of Interior and former Governor of Osun State, Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, during a meeting by his supporters in Oshogbo, Osun State. The attackers, numbering about 5, stormed Aregbesola's campaign office known as Oromio House at Bodofun area and caused panic in the area where the All Progressives Congress members loyal to Aregbesola were holding their meeting. Members of the Osun Progressives who were at the meeting ran for safety as gunmen shot sporadically in the air. The People's Democratic Party Governors Forum has demanded justice for the PDP woman leader Salome Abu, who was burnt alive in her home during the Kogi State governorship election 2019. Until her gruesome murder by suspected political thugs, the late politician was the woman leader in Ofu local government area of the state. The governors also reiterated their call for a decentralized police force with proper checks to check abuse by some governors. The Director General of the PDP, CID Madwabo, stood in for the governors at the event organized to mark the 2nd anniversary of Mrs. Abu's death in Abuja.
Welcome back. This is Daily Politics, and now we're going into the discussion proper. I'm very happy today because I have with me a lawyer and one of Nigeria's finest accountants on both sides of the divide, and of course a constitutional lawyer. So we hope that our listeners will have what we always wanted: to educate you, to get you more politically informed, to enable you to make the right choices and decisions about politics in Nigeria. So I start with you, Prof. We have these bailouts again and again and again. Why in 2015 we had a bailout, in 2017 we had, in 2020 last year we had yet another, and then again just yesterday the government has approved another bailout. What does this say about the states in relation to the federal government in the country?
Thank you very much, Suleiman. By way of context, let me start by saying that bailout by a federal to a subnational is not unusual. It's not unusual in a federal system of government where you have, in our own case, a three-tier structure. You have the federal government, the state government, and the local government. So it's not uncommon to find the federal government, for example, assisting the subnationals, in this case, states and local governments, one way or the other. Especially so in our own case, where the federal government, dominates in terms of revenue allocation. Okay. Yes, you find that the federal government takes as much as 52.6% of the allocation. State governments, 36 states, share just 26.7%, and the local government 774 that are taking 20.6%. So, yes, where you have that kind of arrangement, it's not uncommon, it's not unusual for the federal government to come to the aid of states. But the problem is usually is when it gets to a level where it creates a moral hazard. Moral hazard in the sense that it gets to a point where subnationals become lazy. Okay. And subnationals tend to now borrow or do things in the hope that in future they will be assisted. So that's where the challenge is. That's where the challenge is.
Barrister, you're a constitutional lawyer. You've done this a 1,000 times.
Yes, please.
In our case, he says that it's not unusual, but maybe the frequency is unusual. In 5 years, you're talking about 3 bailouts, or 4 bailouts in 5 years. Isn't that unusual?
Well, to answer the question legally, yes, there is nothing unlawful in what the federal government is doing. Okay. But let's look at it for what it is. I think the word I should be using is whether the indulgence in itself is usual and helpful.
Okay. The indulgence by the federal
government. Okay. It's not just about making them lazy, but the main question is to what use are they putting the funds that they are getting. Okay. We've all been here since about the beginning of this process, and yes, we know the sort of I don't know whether the word is right, but the schemes that the state governors had encrafted in the process itself. In some other cases, you even have them having consultants in a very simple process. The process is the federal government is giving you money on a platter of gold. The interest rate perhaps 0, and the payment terms most liberal, and you don't even need to have a collateral for you to get a loan, and yet they encraft on it some sort of schemes to make them take some part of it from the process, and that's where I have my worries. Okay. The bailout would always be justified. Okay. They say, oh, COVID. And there was a bailout process. Maybe it may not have been called a bailout, but there was also a kind of a fund that the central bank was given to help out the states that were mostly hit. And in the process, you see some of them even doctoring the numbers.
The books, yes.
Yeah, to give justification for them to get the loans. Yes. And in the process, some states have borrowed so much so that they've offended the Fiscal Policy Act. Yes. And this is where I have my own worry. Because whatever loan you have today, the actual lender are the people.
Yes.
And
because it's public money.
Yeah, no, the people of the state, because the money has to be paid.
Okay.
And these people are not consulted.
Okay.
And it is in your own wisdom, you are the person who is going to frame the reason for the debt, for the loan, and you are also the person to go and execute, not for the benefit of the people. Look at what has been happening. Some of them, they go home with less than 3/4 of what they receive in their FAC allocation, because they have to pay, and these monies are taken directly from the FAC allocations. And what that also means, it impacts directly on the economic capacity of the states.
Of the states, yes.
And that in itself has its own multiplier effect, if not ripple effect. Because if development is slow, and you can't meet the social needs, you can't provide social welfare, responsibility, then issue of security will come in. And to me, the governors will just have to wake up and do that which they are elected to do. The idea of them causing around Abuja, they go to pay salaries and come here. When you say a state has to be built out, in economic terms, in business terms, it means without that bailout, you are dead.
They are bankrupt.
Yes.
So you've been a commissioner of finance. You know, you're also a professor of banking and finance and capital markets. So if states need to be bailed out, sometimes the government crafts it in some, sweeter language. They call it budget facility or some other times, budget support facility, or things like that. Yes. Is it that Nigerian states are bankrupt?
So many states are in financial difficulty. Let me put it that way.
Another sweet language. Isn't it just bankrupt?
Is it? Yes. A number of states. You can count on my fingers. You can count the number of states that can actually survive without federal allocation. Recent reports, even by budget, I'm sure you know budget, clearly shows that just a few states, are solvent, on their own. Yes, very many others. If you remove federal allocation, they won't be able even to pay salaries, and that is really a sad commentary. And to make matters worse, you also find them, neck deep into borrowing. Yes. Prior to 2015, as of the fourth quarter, yes, that's the last quarter of 2015, the total debt that state governments, were owing the banks was in excess of 600 billion. Yes. So that was part of why the federal government, had to get the debt management office, in 2016 to assist states. It was one of the relief packages to assist states to restructure those loans, because those loans were taken from banks, and they were short-term loans. To assist them to restructure them to longer-term loans, is at least debt service payments, and all that. It was to give states, some breathing space, and then shortly after, the federal government had to within December 2016. I recall in December 2016. Yes. This issue of Paris Club refund, came up, and the federal government gave the first tranche of Paris Club, to the states, and gave a condition. Use this money to pay between 50% and 75% of the refund should be used to pay clear workers and salaries. But for a number of states, that wasn't done. Even when the second tranche came in July 2017, the condition was also there. Ensure that this money, was used to pay worker salaries. As we speak, a number of states are still, battling with, salary arrears. So what that goes to show is that these bailout funds and these support facilities, have not really been prioritized, have not been used for the purposes, they are meant exactly. So that's what it clearly shows.
So on the one hand, states are not generating their own enough income, which is why they are in financial difficulty in the first instance. On the other hand, they are being bailed out by the federal government, and at the same time there are issues of allegations of what they do, the mismanagement of these funds.
Sulaiman,
yes,
let's start calling a spade a spade.
Okay.
The state are not managing themselves. If we are talking about the governors,
Okay.
Let's start naming them.
Yes, the governors.
The governors.
Yes.
The governors are not creative.
Okay.
With due respect, not many of them have capacity for governance. It is not the amount of money that you have that would actually make you effective, but your ability
to utilize
it. I have had some studies, and I'm not finished on it, but I have my guess that there are so many states in Nigeria that have more fund to use than Rwanda. But take a look at
the Rwanda, the high-flying African country,
that's what I'm
post
yes.
Conflict.
Yes, and there are some states too that earn more than Ghana. But yet,
in terms of what they receive from federal allocation,
and without doing anything. But what is happening? They take, like I said, their business. They think governance is like a headmaster's job. It is not. It is not. When they say governance is about the protection of life and property, you don't protect life with armor. You give life essence to live. And that is the welfare aspect of it. And that is the purpose of state. And that is the purpose of governance. If you are not creative, if you cannot generate revenue enough to manage the state, in whatever form you come, my word for you is that you're a failure. And that is what we are battling with here. We have gentlemen with no background and no preparation for governance. And they got into office and they are overwhelmed. Not just by the burden of the office, but self-inflicted burden in itself, which is greed. And for them, they get into office, the next stage in their own mind is, I want to have a bigger Mercedes than the other. That is where they put their energy. I can tell you for free, with better management,
but since he has
better focus, better management, better management of resources, and better focus, and dedication to the job. Some of these states that you think they are not viable today could be viable. Edo State was some years back not viable.
Okay.
But take a look at where it is on the run now. Somebody did that job. It could also happen. The possibilities are there, but nobody to tap them. That is where we are. They spend most of the time in bickering. They spend most of the time in all sort of machination to keep the office without the necessary attention to the basics of governance, which is the provision of welfare for the people.
Thank you. So, Prof, you're not only a prof, you are also a commissioner of finance. So you have actually managed, unlike the rest of us here, you have actually managed
I agree with him.
The finances of the state. So where do the monies go?
I agree with his views.
Yes, good.
It also boils down to prioritization. You find a lot of wasteful spending, a lot of leakages, you know, at the state level. So even when we talk about ramping up IGR, it even begins from plugging leakages. Because even if you try to increase revenue and there are leakages, the money will still be going away.
Kind of fill a basket.
Exactly. And that's why you find in many states today, you have a governor, for example, having political appointees that, a number of them that he doesn't really need. You have a number of states today carrying heavy load in terms of MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. That there's so many. Okay, so you also have, you find in some states too, okay, where the issues of ghost workers is also high. So by the time you look at some of these areas, you clean up your payroll, for example, you ensure that you are operating as a slim, government, have rationalized ministries, okay. You're also making sure that the political appointees are not, too many, okay. By the time you save, on these areas, you end up freeing up funds, to now provide things that will go towards welfare. So for me, fiscal discipline is even one. The other aspect too. Yes. Because when we talk about IGR, we often think of how do we increase taxes? Okay, when you don't provide the services, when, for example, you're not doing roads, okay, not forget about you might say, okay, in your state, there are state roads, there are local government roads. So when you're not doing those ones, when you're not providing healthcare, when you're not providing education, okay, people are not encouraged to pay tax. People don't have reason to trust you. So even when you say you levy or pay tax, you find you have difficulty, getting people to pay, because they don't see that they don't see you fulfilling that social contract. You are not also providing those services. Why should they pay tax? So for you to get people to pay tax, to encourage voluntary compliance, okay, you should be seen to be working. You should be seen to be doing something. Okay, so that is number one. The other aspect too also has to do with looking at the resources. This one now touches on this when we talk about resource control and all that. Yeah. Okay, I also think that if state governments are allowed to control resources in their area, that will also help them increase IGR. There is no, for example, if you allow Zamfara State that has gold to have more control over the gold deposits in, to be in a position to attract investors into, I believe that, and there is no state in this federation that doesn't have one thing or the one thing or the other. So maybe that aspect, we can also look at that aspect. It's also along that line that this argument about VAT. Yes. Allowing states to possibly also collect VAT and then contribute to the center.
I will come to all of this, but from what he has said and what you said earlier, I see an opening that is probably a question of law. When banks give out a loan to an individual or a company, that loan that they give out gives them some power to direct the behavior of the company or the individual in a particular way. Such as, okay, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to pay 33% of your salary to the loan, or in repayment of the loan also. So if there is bad governance, across the states, for example, in Bayelsa recently, it was reported that the governor appointed about 2,000 special advisors and spent nearly 700 million plus on them on a monthly basis. So shouldn't the federal government that is giving out these loans, shouldn't those loans come with conditions? After all, when the federal government itself is borrowing from external lenders, they give it also conditions. Are there legal...
No, all borrowings. Okay. All borrowings are regulated by the Debt Management Bureau. Okay. Debt Management Office. No, it's the same thing. The parameters for borrowing and the minimum and maximum borrowing rates are specified. And if you check the checklist, if they follow those parameters, some of these loans wouldn't have been taken
in the first place.
But there is some permissive chain among the institution or the agencies that are supposed to check. For example, SEC is looking the other way. And some of these loans, if checked, SEC had actually been acting to its office mandate, they wouldn't have been allowed.
Okay.
I have had to go to court. The case is pending.
You mean the state executive councils? Or
No.
Okay.
The Security and Exchange Commission.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's a lending. You are going to lend from the public, either as a private disbursement for whatever it is. It has to meet and align with the fiscal policy. You're talking about that. And there is a fiscal policy, fiscal responsibility
commission.
act.
Yes.
You understand?
And the act, yes.
Yeah, that establishes that commission for all of this, so that people are not left to their own imaginations.
But maybe these things are seen as political rather than legal or even economic.
No, it's because sometimes too, I tend to blame us because we always do not try to say, is there no way we can look at the law to see what it says about this as to what is to be done? You understand? And like I told you, I have a test case in court concerning that to say, if you are actually doing your job, could this be going on? For an example, you have a state governor writing a letter overnight asking for permission, approval from the State House of Assembly. Today, they sit the next day, within an hour, they give me a written letter of approval. Okay. When the law says that,
for time,
when the law says that, you have to consult with the people because, like I said, they are the people on whose behalf you are lending, you are borrowing that money.
Yes.
They are the borrowers. So if you go and borrow on their behalf without them knowing, and with a process whereby somebody gets the approval within an hour, then something is amiss.
You can get a chance to do that when we come back on a break. You know, if you are just joining us, we'll take a break now. When we return, we continue our discussion on bailout for states. Don't go away.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV. We're discussing issues around the bailout to the states and, of course, the Paris Club refund. So maybe we've talked quite a bit on the bailout.
Yes, and I wanted to say something with regard to borrowing.
Yes.
You see, we have a Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. Section 41 of that act clearly says that, all tiers of government, if they have to borrow for capital projects and
rather
human capital,
like salaries.
yes, human capital development and capital is very clear there. Section 42 requires them to set borrowing limits, to serve as caution. So you don't
overborrow and leave debt for the next.
Exactly. Okay. So that act talks about borrowing for long term, and that is where the Securities and Exchange Commission comes in. It's only when states are borrowing from the capital markets that is when SEC comes in. I used to be in I used to be in SEC.
Yes.
So SEC does not regulate, but the borrowing that is done through the bank. So usually when states, because they find that one easier. When they want to come to if they have to borrow from the capital market, issue bonds, for example, borrow long term, they are subjected to very strict conditions.
Why they are not able to pay, even to pay back to the federal government, or why they are in debt, is because they had borrowed from the banks.
That's what I'm saying. They find that as an easier route. Okay. Many of them will not want to go through the conditions, put in place by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So they go to banks and negotiate these loans at very, high costs. Okay. And when they borrow, banks, of course, banks will have a limit in terms of 10 of the loans they will give you. They borrow from banks and then try to use that to finance projects. You don't borrow short-term to do long-term projects. So that mismatch has put a lot of them, into crisis. So the point I'm making is that the Securities and Exchange Commission, does not really have its mandate does not cover that.
Yes. So who should enforce that law, the Fiscal Responsibility Law 2007 that he mentioned? Act.
It's a commission. There is a commission. And SEC is also, like he has said, responsible for that. But let me come to the issue of the debt. The banks themselves are under CBN. Yeah, they're under CBN. And
so there is that level of regulation.
Yeah, there is a limit to the kind of loans they can give out and to who.
So you have regulators everywhere, but they don't seem to be working, isn't it?
The idea of even lending to public authorities, to me, in itself, has to be checked by the central bank. Because that's a very easy source of both ways. These gentlemen are very smart.
You mean the governors?
Money laundering could come in so many forms. And except you are wise in the game, you will not see it coming, and you will not see it going. But if you check through the books and you see how these loans crisscross, how they are gotten and how they are paid and how the funds being borrowed are transacted thereafter, you will have an idea of what I'm talking about. And all of this, the most disappointing public institution is the state houses of assemblies. Because no borrowing of whatever form
shouldn't pass through them in the first place.
No borrowing of any other form can take place without their own approval. And all of them have their own laws, like he has said. And their laws specifically just copied
the law at the federal level.
And also put in the same, if we want to have the Commissioner of Finance, of course he knows his duty that he was doing in the process in itself, all of those ones. The governor will sit down in one day and get through all of those processes.
Which means there are many institutions that are there to safeguard these things, but who maybe are not doing their jobs. So just one question before we go to the Paris Club issue. If you have the states that you have borrowed money to in 2015, I mean specifically 2016, 2020, and they have not been able to pay you back because the previous ones that they borrowed, they have not paid back. The deductions have not been made. In fact, each time the federal government talks about deducting, the governors don't want to hear. And the Nigerian Governors Forum, they begin to join ranks and then kick against that. Why is the government giving them another bailout?
Yes, I think, just as the minister explained, as a matter of fact, I was actually at that conference.
That conference?
Yes, the National Council on Finance and Economic Development, the one that held in Lagos.
Interesting.
Yes, the minister made it clear that the over 600 billion naira is meant to be a bridging facility, over a 6-month period.
Another switch language.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So why is that coming? It's coming because sometime in January, February of 2020, yes, I think the federal government actually started deducting Yes, the deductions, got started. So, in order to provide a reprieve, a breather, the federal government is now saying, because a lot of states are still having difficulty with those deductions, paying salaries. So the government is saying, okay, let's now provide this bridging facility for a 6-month period to cushion the burden of those deductions.
You seem to have an idea on that.
No. I want him to give us the word. There is a word for that.
Okay.
You borrow to pay a debt.
Okay, refinancing?
No. When you borrow to pay debt, that's the worst form of loan you can get in the world, because
you're not using it.
Yeah, of course. It's pure mismanagement.
Okay.
That is, it even gives you a danger signal. Because it's like you are living on a life support. That's what it is. You borrow with the aim that the use and the product of that loan would not just pay off the loan, but will also give you a surplus.
Yes.
You understand? But let's come back to this before we go for this.
Yes.
I don't want us to overlook the question as to where is the federal government getting that money for. Is it its own? Yes. If it is its own,
has definitely come into that, because the federal government itself is also borrowing.
Yeah, that's why
so that we need to factor that into the discussion.
So there is something amiss here.
So
you have your own responsibilities
to lend out.
You have your own responsibilities.
Yes.
And they are more or less submerging you, and yet you indulge these people. And at the end of the day,
the whole assistance is coming from the. It's also going to be done through the Central Bank of Nigeria. Central Bank is the lender of last resort. So at the end of the day, whatever arrangement the federal government has, I think.
But the whole discussion is saying that sometimes we are not at the last resort. We're just borrowing because...
That's what I'm saying.
No,
they are taking from the central bank will make available, the funds. It's not as if the federal government has the money.
Okay.
It's not provided in the budget now.
So it will also borrow from somewhere.
Exactly, from the central bank. And the federal government is in a stronger position to borrow from the central bank, than these
to lend out to the states.
Yes.
So let's move to the Paris Club issue now, which is also in a way tied in to all of these issues. The Paris Club debt was paid off in 2005 by the administration of the former President Olusegun Obasanjo.
There was a reprieve of, is it 18 billion, right?
Yes.
18 years.
And then we paid 12 billion, I think, right? Yeah. So, and then everything else was supposed to have been forgiven, and we were supposed to just go home and sleep and hear no more about Paris Club. So why is it that 16 years later, we're still hearing about Paris Club loans?
I think you would explain to us better, but I think what transpired thereafter, or what the state discovered, was that even thereafter, there are some deductions made from them that were not supposed to be made. So it's that refund that they've been asking for. It's their own money. So when I hear you say federal government says you should put this money into this, I do not think it's an order, it's an advice. It can't go for an order. Your money is your money, and within the federal structure system, nobody is the boss. You are a boss within your own area of jurisdiction. So I think that's where we have it. But I think the Paris Club in itself presents to us the most ugly part of governance
in the country.
Everybody all over the place, they are all rich. Private individual, consultants, all of this. And where is the money coming from? Say the Paris Club. And yet Nigerians who are supposed to have benefited from it are getting poorer by the day. So the question I want to ask is, would there really be someday, sometime, when somebody would have a reality check on the entire system in itself? When I say the entire system, I'm talking about the entire Paris Club process itself, from the beginning to what we have today.
Thank you.
If we have that person, perhaps we may be able to get the full story.
Thank you very much. That question, of course, is for you, not for me. But before we even get to that, Prof, one of the things he mentioned is consultants and the issue of what amount of that is going to consultants and what do they, some 418 million US dollars going to consultants. That's has been a key, a part of the controversy surrounding the Paris Club.
Yes.
So can you shed light more on that, especially given that what kind of consultancy services will somebody do?
That's the question.
To be paid for 480 million, you can start a whole new Nigeria.
Yes. That's why the states are kicking against it. Well, by what background? Recall, as you rightly mentioned, 2005, 2006, we had this debt buyback arrangement with the Paris Club. At that time, the Paris Club debt was about $30 billion.
Okay.
And the Paris Club said, okay, they were going to give, forgive 18 billion if we're able to pay 12 billion. So we paid $12 billion in two tranches, $6 billion and $6 billion, okay. So, in full settlement of the 30 billion. So 18 billion was written off. Now, in paying those funds, okay, of course, if the government took money that was meant for both the states and local governments to settle. Meanwhile, the debt was owed by the federal government. Do you understand? Yes. So the money that was used to repay should have been solely for the federal government, but what was used to pay back was what was meant for the 3 tiers of government. And over time, from 1995 up to 2005, there are also some deductions, in terms of debt service that were done from the state's allocation.
Which monies that belong to the states and local
subnationals, exactly. So that is what some consultants are claiming, that they assisted the states and local governments to get. These same consultants, some of the consultants are also saying that in addition to that they also did something for local governments, that Algon gave them contracts. The Association of Local Governments of Nigeria gave them contracts to do something for them, and that they did those things, okay? And that's why the money the government is trying to remove the money from local government accounts, okay? Now, they are claiming $480 million as just consultancy fees. Okay, of course there are a number of them. Even 480 million. And somehow,
how does that sound? Certainly, as a prof,
no. It's, for me, it's
is it outrageous? Is it normal?
That's the word.
Okay,
that's the word. And based on what the president was told, the information, what he was told, he approved. He had given approval, sometime for this money to be paid, and only recently, okay, the states were made to know that, were informed that deduction, was going to commence. That was what led to the deadlock in the FAC meeting of October.
Yes.
When they are saying to share September revenue,
yes,
there was a deadlock. The states said no, they were not going to, and they went to court. So the case is now in court. The Federal High Court, the Justice of the Federal High Court, Justice Enyang Eko, okay, gave an order, restraining the federal government from
further
deduction, because they had done an out-of-court settlement. Federal government, and agreed to pay 418, for which they got the president, convinced him to sign. So it was just the process of commencement of the deduction.
Okay.
So now the state said,
Thank you. You asked a question earlier, which we wanted him to answer about whether or not it's time for someone to actually look at this whole Paris Club.
That's my prayer.
But and that question is valid, and we'll come back to you to answer that question within the remaining 5 minutes that we have. But Professor Charles Soludo, now Governor-elect Anambra State, he said something similar to what you said earlier about the Paris Club debt payment. He was saying that it wasn't sound economics, that you don't pay loan with all the money that you have. And in this case, it's now clear that even the federal government didn't have it, because it took the monies belonging to the states and the local governments in order to be able to pay all that debt. That a wiser choice would have been to schedule the payment over 10, 20 years, while you are using the capital to build dams and roads and bridges and things that will help the productive sector of the economy?
You know, I think it's coming out of the principle that you make money with money.
Okay.
Simple. And the Americans have also taught us that if you jig up the productive sector, when I say productive, I'm not just talking about those who produce bread and butter.
Yes.
The highways.
Yes, the railways.
Any sort of industry that will call in as many of the active population as possible for them to earn money.
Yes.
You are what? Jigging the productive sector. Because I'm not a finance person, but my understanding of how money makes money is this. We are three here. If we have $1 or 1 naira, sorry, to use that word, and I give you 1 naira value, and you give me the 1 naira, he gives me 1 naira value, I give him the 1 naira, it rotates like that.
Yes.
Before it goes 4 or 5 times, it's no longer 1 naira we are talking about.
Yes.
You get the drift.
Yes.
And each point gives value, and that value makes up what? The GDP.
Yes.
So if you have that chunk of money and you put it into projects that would themselves employ as many of these youth as possible, it may produce much more than what was forgiven. I think that's the logic. Okay. But the downside of it, too, you are dealing with the Nigerian system.
Okay.
You're dealing with the Nigerian system.
How so?
Logic doesn't work.
Okay.
Most of the time, the most incongruous thing are the normal. Look at what we are having now. How many of these youths are idle there? That is money wasting.
Okay.
That's money wasting. As many as unemployed youth you have, that's the amount of money you are wasting by the day. Because what? They are not adding to
value. They're not paying taxes. They're not. Yes.
Forget about the taxes. Because taxes is on income.
Yes.
And if they don't earn income, they don't pay tax. And it is your business to make sure that they earn income.
First.
Look at us. We have security problems. We have all reasons to mop them up and make them earn money by the day.
Thank you. So, Prof,
let me also say something on this.
Okay, that's about the last...
yes, this Paris thing, the argument about, why we even paid, okay? At that time, it was really a problem. We were spending as much as $2 billion every year just on servicing that debt. And if we had allowed that principal to remain the way it was, $30 billion, okay, yes. It kept on accumulating interest payments, penalties, and all manner of things. So it was necessary that thing was to pay off. And at that time too, fortunately for Nigeria, reserves were already high. We had reserves of over $60 billion.
So in 10 seconds, what should Nigeria do about this 480 million consultants?
No, we don't. We still, state governments will tell you that they still don't know the basis for it. There has to be a second look at it and review. We are not saying if consultants actually did something. Nobody is saying that they shouldn't get anything, but there should be basis for whatever they are getting. The amount is simply outrageous.
Okay, yes. Thank you. The amount is simply outrageous. Yes. I think on that account, gentlemen, thank you for coming on the show today. This is where we draw the curtain for today's program. Thank you for staying with us, and do join us again same time tomorrow for another edition of Daily Politics. By tomorrow, of course, I mean on Monday, since today is Friday. I am your regular host, Suleiman. Enjoy the rest of your day.